As those of you who follow my videos and written material, you know that I focus on the light. And so has my mentor, Thoth, through all these years with me. But there are times when other things need to be said, especially now, as I speak to you in 2024. Always, however, it leads back to the light. So let us remember this as we live and breathe, and also as you listen to what I have to say here. As a preface, I would say that we already know there are negative influences really trying to stack the deck at this time through technology. Of course, there always have been negative influences at work in various ways and means, but now the awaited technology is here. And by awaited, I mean from the darker side, from what my sources call the One World Legion, or OWL. They've been planning this for a long time, and now they have enacted it, at least the first stages. And we have, the 5G, chemical interference, most especially through orchestrated infections and orchestrated protections that aren't protections. All of these things, and these are very real and very dangerous, and they are already at work depopulating us, making us very ill. And it's the tip of the iceberg as to what's to come. Now, saying all that dire stuff, I know, is not something you want to hear when you turn on this video. But here it is. It's in our face. And yet there is so much that we can do, that the forces who are working for the light that are helping us are doing. There's so much. It's a magical time because it is a time of transference. It's the in-between time when we transfer what we have been sludging along in, tolerating, and move it into a perception that switches the whole thing into a dimension of light. Now, it's not magic. It's practical science. It's quantum realization. And eventually we will let go of this planet as it is now and move from a world system 1 to a world system 2. And it's not that far ahead of us. But in the in-between, we must make decisions, radical decisions in our lives that we've never made before. And if we do not, then we succumb to the tipping of the scales. And the scales won't be tipping in your favor. So at this time, feel in your bones, in your being, as Thoth says, it is time to, fear not, rise up, because you were born to do this. It's not about a belief system. It's not about a particular practice, although life is a practice and life is a belief system. We can't get away from that. But what I mean is, let's embody the spirituality that we claim for ourselves that is beyond any trappings of limitations. I know that's not easy. In one way, it's not easy, but in another way, all we have to do is embrace it, because when we do, as my mentor Thoth has told me many times, we don't have to transform all of it. We just have to begin to do it and then ask for help. As Yeshua said, ask and ye shall receive. But we have to show up. We have to take a stand and be there to receive that help. So that's my pep talk. And it's based on 57 years of work with my mentor Thoth and my own inner development and spiritual evolution, which still lacks considerably, I will admit, but I show up That's all we can ask of anyone, to continue to do that. So what is this video about? Well, I'm going to be sharing with you some of what you've heard before, but this is just little sound bites coming together, strung together, so you can see how it all falls into place as a science that is both something the owl are attempting to utilize, are utilizing in some cases, and also we can tap into to form a stronger bond with the science that operates our world. And we don't have to get the test tubes out to do it. This is an inner process, because quantum science begins with you, in your heart, in your being, in your soul. So I'm going to be reading to you some definitions that Thoth has given me through the years on certain sciences. I'm going to make it short. It's not going to be a long treatise on each one that, scrambles your brain. But as you listen to it, breathe it in and see how one connects to the next, connects to the next. Because here we're following a daisy chain. And I will be commenting along the way to help you, to guide you into that daisy chain flow. So let us begin. This verse that I'm going to read to you was given to me only about 2 years ago. It's on the soluble crystals and a boral field. That's ABORAL. The core impact of the intrusive manipulative frequencies are at this time being delivered through 5G and into what Thoth is calling the soluble crystals of the planetary grid. He defines these soluble crystals as frequency crystals that are mutable and can be manipulated. They contain a bonding frequency with the minerals in water. They therefore simulate the fluid composition and waveform of water, but on a higher frequency bandwidth that is thus far invisible to humans and most animals. They are visible and sensed in the body by cetaceans and birds and all plants. Of course, they affect all living things in the natural world in which they dwell. The boral field is the world of soluble crystals and their operative zone. Since boral is not a term Thoth has used with me before, I thought I would give it a Google and found that it is defined as opposite or away from the mouth. So why would he use boral in this instance? The field in which the soluble crystals are formed and exist is opposite to the mouth or field of elemental substantiation, in which all physical denser substance is formed and operates directly within an environment. The boral is the field in which the code is written for the physical universe. This is a broad statement that deserves further clarification, as Thoth has not defined physical as a true state. Everything is vibration. The denser vibrations we qualify at some point as physical. So how may this field be disturbed? Well, actually, the field itself is not disturbed, but codes can be written into the field that cause the soluble crystals to think they're getting new commands. Well, they are getting new commands, but they're not commands we want them to get. So this is part of what is going on with the spikes and other aspects of what is being delivered directly into our blood and passing the blood-brain barrier very intentionally. However, it's also the path that we can use and the higher beings that are helping us can use to correct the problem. The next is endogenetic. The term endogenetic, which is ENDOGENETIC, is a Thoth word which refers to a very high-level genetic type information held in a stellar field of consciousness. On Earth, we have the physical genetics of the body. Then there are the paragenetics of the soul. Now, the paragenetics transfer the most positive of our learned lessons, experience, knowledge, and wisdom from one lifetime to the next. And it integrates to some degree, depending on how open we are in our physical selves, into our physical genetics. And it can also go up the genetic vine, which is interesting because it's out of time and space. So, again, there's the paragenetics of the soul, but endogenetic information would be the cosmic level of vibrational register which feeds through the paragenetic spiral. What is being attacked is the genetic field. There are also other aspects of all that are going into our brain and our nervous system and our cells and all kinds of things. But it is the genetic field that is the basic operative system that is being attacked. And this is coming from their knowledge that they received from off-world sources that aren't friendly to us, or at least don't care, certain information, and they've developed it through many years. So they know some of this, enough to cause some serious damage to the system that we dwell within. And because they know that the genetic field is far more dimensional than, science depicts it to us in the everyday world, they are able to find ways to manipulate that. The main delivery at this point are basically almost all so-called protections against infections, but especially the one that has more recently been delivered to us, starting in 2020 or 2021, whenever that particular one was rolled out. But it began with the infection itself. There was some delivery in that as well. That was the beta version. So understanding the depth we have to draw upon within our genetic system that goes beyond the physical here, and it reaches into the cosmos and into the quantum reality. This is the way we have to be able to correct it and to protect it. Doctrine of signature. Thoth speak also refers to it as the knowledge form, infinity mandala, and light inscription. Wikipedia defines doctrine of signature as, and I quote here, the doctrine of signatures dating from the time of, now I can't pronounce this fellow's name, so I'm going to spell it Dioscorides, and Galen, states that herbs resembling parts or various parts of the body can be used by herbalists to treat ailments of those body parts. A theological justification, as stated by botanists such as William Coles, was that God would have wanted to show men what plants would be useful for. That's the end of quotes. However, from the Thothakasha, it is in essence the memory, path, universal identification of all energy beingness contained as a systemic body. The earth, as a planetary body system, has a unique doctrine of signature, as does a human, a bee, and a genus of flower, and further, an individual plant. This signature defines and connects each energy body to source. Now, the doctrine of signature is one of the most primary core identifications of the human condition. And it's not just identification like, hey, this is what this is. I mean, it identifies the being to the universe, to the God source experience. So it is sacred. And it has a definite inscription of being. It defines everything that you are. That doesn't mean that it holds you back, that you have to be just this one thing and you can't be anything else. Far from it, because the doctrine of signature allows you infinity. It allows you dimension. It allows you to create and to evolve and to experience the all. It cannot be defiled, but it certainly is something that we can draw upon. Now, if you take a plant and you cut it into a zillion little pieces, you'd say, well, that destroys the doctrine of signature. But it doesn't, because it's like a hologram. Every little particle reflects the whole signature. When we chop up our vegetables, cook it and eat it, or don't cook it and eat it, we're receiving the doctrine of signature of everything that goes into our body that was once alive. The signature only dissipates through the process of rotting, of breaking down. That's when the signature will start leaving. So it doesn't just end when the life force ends. It ends when the body or the food or whatever goes through a form of putrefaction. At some point in all of that, rather early on, that is when the doctrine of signature will start dissolving, I guess you could say. So if we eat good food, the fresher the better, we're taking those signatures into our body. So what does that do? Well, that actually aligns to supporting and continuing and evolving our signatures. I said they can't be tampered with, but they evolve. That's why they're able to connect us to the infinity pattern, because the signature is evolving. And one of the ways, just one, is through our physical lives and what we put into our bodies. Now, if we put negative things into our bodies, it doesn't destroy the signature, but it doesn't help it to evolve. So when I said it couldn't be tampered with, I meant that it can't be, deteriorated. But it relies on good food and healthy environment to evolve in the body. And there is one other thing about the doctrine of signature which I wish to share here, because the topic itself is so fascinating. I could probably write a book just on the doctrine of signature. But this is that, according to Thoth, many of the souls of Earth, those who were beginning the whole process of this planet, began in what he calls the lotus reality. And I have a video on that. And in that realm, human beings formed down the same path as plants. So we were more plant-like in that realm, before we came down the lotus stem, metaphorically speaking, to the more physical earth. So we're really, plants in a way. I mean, we're much more than that now. We've developed and whatever, but we have that similitude with the plant kingdom that is very powerful and very strong. So when we eat plants, we take into our bodies the doctrine of signatures of those plants that are very copacetic with ours. Now, when we eat meat, that isn't the case, because there is a barrier between one species and another consuming each other's signatures, because it's just part of the process of keeping a generative flow going in that particular species. So we think of ourselves not in the same species as animals, but we are. We're all mammals. So it's not the best thing when we're consuming meat, because it is interfering with the natural, synergy, I guess is the word I want to use, synergy between the species. However, I eat meat, not a lot, but I have to have it or I'll just leave the planet sooner than intended. I don't eat a lot. Like I said, mostly bone broth, a little tiny bit of organic chicken, but I do much better on it. And I know there are other people that do. I'm not advocating that everybody should be a vegetarian. Thoth explains it that now on the surface of the planet, the way things are going, there are people, a lot of people, that need at least a little meat, or, just a little bit, not going whole hog, and eating a whole hog or a beef cattle or anything like that, sticking with chicken, probably not fish right now because it's so contaminated, but organic chicken and especially bone broth. He highly recommends that. So it's not saying, oh my God, you can't eat any meat, you're going to mess up your doctrine of signature. That's not at all true. But if you, as long as you eat other healthy foods, like a lot of vegetables, you're balancing the system out. In the inner earth, they don't eat meat, but they don't have to. Their bodies are already balanced, and so they don't have to worry about that. So I just wanted to make that clear. But going back to our synergy with plants, when we combine their doctrines into our field, it's not altering our doctrine of signature, but it's feeding it. It's giving it information that it needs to expand and dimensionalize. Holometric. From Thoth, when we speak to you of ascension, this is the frequency of microgeometry, ascending the tonal scale of harmonics to enter the new earth geometric base of World System 2 holometric encoding within the energy bodies. This new inscription of light will automatically transfer Earth and humans' reality field into the blue star sun, Rigel. So you see, place is changed through awareness and not physical linear travel from point A to point B. The microportals in elementation, minerals, plants, cells, etc., are created by blue needles which quantum leap through matter via focal transactions of cognitive displacement. Now I ask, could you please explain focal transactions of cognitive displacement, and while you are at it, the definition of holometric? Short versions, please. Thoth replies, the universe contains intelligent movements of hyper-energy we have previously given you explanation of as itons. Within the itonic variable is a tracking system that locks onto common signals within the energy systems of the universal continuum. This is inclusive of all elementation. As the itonic tracking finds these commonalities, it creates a broadband between them, focusing and transferring information between these common points or focal transactions. Cognitive displacement are the dead feeds or junk signals that are no longer active. These are removed through focal transactions. The blue needle strikes are then free to enter, to find resonance with the subatomic fields. Holometric encoding is an intelligent measure, an equation, of everything in that field, i.e. the 44 Stargate portal, and then transferring the equation into a more refined light mathematical state. Now to go over a few points here. First is itons. I've mentioned them in a lot of my videos. Particles of superatomic substance created by breaking atomic bonding to the orotronic or half-light spiral. These particles act as seeds for the Metatronic full-light consciousness in this reality system. One of the ways itons are created is during the lightning strikes in the Sephirothic tree. Atoms are converted into itons by metabolizing through a rhombic energy field stimulated by a charge in etheric density. Itons are atoms that have been turned inside out. Once our physical atoms have the proper light mathematic encodings to itinize, we will be able to safely pass through the LP40 ascension, the world ascension, into the newer star reality. For the intended focus of this video, holometric encoding refines and develops and clears away certain inconsistencies, shall I say, in the coding platform. It's like the parts of the coding that doesn't quite make the grade. So there's a lot of things that the holometric is about, but for our purposes in this video, that's the one I wish to highlight here. Through the amplification of the holometric programming and encoding, we can be able to rectify, to mitigate some of the discordant fields that are entering the system of our bodies. Infinity code. The infinity code presents itself in a light language format, yet it is a universal principle and also a dynamic tool with a special job that is triggered by specific encoding from elemental geometries when those geometries are activated to reach beyond their form, to transmute into higher registers within the quantum field. When numbers are crunched to advance a system toward infinity possibilities, then what Thoth is calling the infinity code responds. It becomes the platform to move the system to accelerate further and further into the infinity streaming. These infinity codes are not simply triggered by science and math. They must come through the Imstra molecules of humanity. Now we're going to be talking more about the Imstra molecules just a little later here, so I'm not going to go into the definition just now. I was guided to bring the infinity code into this picture here for the video because there are computers that are being developed to tap into this code. And some of them are trying to do so, but will not succeed because they don't have the right consciousness. Others will succeed because the consciousness is there to support it through the Imstra. Strillium of Divine Genesis. That's STRALLILIUM. These strillium are the radials of Metatronic or full light, which are designated to penetrate the subsuvial membrane of an ensouled being and infuse the corporeal body of that soul's matter expression with the codes of divine kinship and thus service beyond the tapestry of karmic revolutions. That says a mouthful, but first let's look at subsuvial membrane just for a moment. The subsuvial membrane is a contact substance of interface between the etheric and the corpuscles of the blood. So let's go back to that last line. The subsuvial membrane infuses the corporeal body of that soul's matter expression with the codes of divine kinship and thus service beyond the tapestry of karmic revolutions. What this is implying, or more than implying, is that through this connection to the physicality of our being, where our trials and tribulations are, as well as some of our more wonderful experiences, this gives a link between the higher soul self and the service, the kinship of service that we incarnated to perform in a lifetime. It says, this is where you're going because this is your service. This is what you were born to do. It's not trying to box you in. There are a lot of ways to perform your service, but all of those ways are connected to a core frequency. And that is what it's speaking of here. So that's why it's the strillium of divine genesis, because you're constantly creating a genesis factor in your being, a rebirthing, a new level of service, of divine kinship with the all. Now we return to the Imstra molecule. This is part of the real core science of everything that has been given me through Thoth intelligence, and it's brought forward again and again through all of these years. I believe it was originally introduced to me in the 1980s. The Imstra, which is short for Metatronic Star Tect Redemption Apex, is an etheric light molecule which holds the path of our return to light within the DNA helixes. It is likened to a homing beacon, sending signals from our DNA to source or zero point in the creation event moment. Currently, the Imstra is not fully functional in humanity. Once turned on to its hyperstate, we will indeed become the supernal beings we were meant to be. When the Imstra molecule reaches its full metatronic or full light access within the human form once again, the atmic rotation will slow so that the Imstra can nova within the cellular system, creating the pure gem metaform. This will free humankind from the karmic field entirely. Now, I have a lot more on the Imstra molecule. I have a video on it, and it's mentioned again and again in my work, but that's about where we're going to take it for this video here. It's obvious that the Imstra molecule is the God molecule, the God particle, if you will, for the entire systemic path of the soul through evolutionary process. Now, I use the word evolutionary. Thoth says, well, we can use that word, but actually there's more to understanding what evolution really is, and but we're not going to go there, okay? We're just going to say evolution because we understand it in that terminology, and it's not misleading, it's just not complete. So, back to the Imstra. It guides us, it forms the signal that says, now is the time to move from one state to the next, and it gives us that freedom, that liberty to become infinite beings. The Imstra leads us to another core science from the Thothic record, and that is the pure gem body. Thoth speaks of the pure gem as the future ascended state of the human form. It is a multifaceted light vehicle for the soul. Thoth encourages us not to wait for the future, since time is a multidimensional vehicle, past and present can be summoned into the now moment. From one of my 1970s treatises on the subject, and I quote, and of course I have this on another video now, but I'm going to put it into the context of what we're speaking of here, so I'm going to be restating it. The pure gem is a vibrational melding of etheric wave and human realization, causing a physical reaction. This gem is to manifest in mineral form in the future and will be known as star mist, among other names. The whole of the earth and the physical body of mankind will eventually align their molecular atomic rotation to the etheric level of the pure gem. As light is reflected in the prismatic form of a gem, so the sequence of atomic structure will form facets in the genetic structure of man, regulating the diffraction of spiritual energies to encompass the whole spectrum or the total spectrum of etheric rays. We're speaking of the transformation of the physical body into a gem-like quality. I don't mean like you go around looking like a crystal, but it is a crystalline frequency, because remember, the DNA has a crystalline base to it. And so it is merely the opening up of that crystalline frequency in the DNA that causes it to become what Thoth is calling here the pure gem body. And it is an essential condition for us in the New Earth star frequency. But right now, as we speak, these many years since I received this in the 1970s, we are building that frequency. It may not seem that way some mornings when you get up and you can barely bend over to tie your shoes, but it is building in the collective DNA gene pool. Now, the problem is is that that gene pool is being fiddled with in a very direct and dark manner. And that is something that will have to be rectified, at least within the bodies of those of us who choose to move from a world system 1 to a world system 2. Now we need to look at consensual reality. Within the Thoth Translation Library, consensual reality refers to a group or mass of individualized sentience, as an example, within human beings, that agree certain things are as they are. In other words, humans on Earth agree that water is wet and fire is hot, that day follows night. The brain of the individual will gravitate to accept this common perception, even when that individual is actually perceiving on some greater level information which may contradict the consensual reality with which they have agreed to participate. This is not just a brainwashing. It is a true perceptual shift, a cognitive redesign in order to accommodate the consensual reality. Certainly people who are brainwashed, who have been mentally targeted and groomed, will find themselves participating in a specific consensual reality. But brainwashing is only a first step. It is not yet a cognitive controlled shift into literally an alternate reality. Yet if this focused perception is not switched off at that juncture, they will indeed take the step into the designer reality. But what about the rest of us? Is humanity being brainwashed as a precursor to embracing a consensual reality? Yes and no. Let us take the no first. There is a natural process of embracing a basic consensual reality, which is necessary in lesser realms in order to function as a group of souls all sharing a common ground. Without this basic consensus, we would not be able to perceive one another, at least not in any functional sharing way. Yes, it is a form of brainwashing when we leave the basic agreement behind and enter a convoluted version of it, what is orchestrated by some other than our perceived selves, mental design to separate us from the common platform. This intention alienates us from divine centropy or core unity and scatters us to the winds. Yet even our basic common consensus is flawed. It develops from our need to unify, but it does not take us all the way home. When humanity moves from the baseline of World System 1 to World System 2, we will discard the need for a contiguous consensus among us. Instead, our unification will come from a greater sentience beyond the pale of the need to quantify our limitations in order to keep us in check. This internal quantifying is an attempt to protect us from our lower nature's creational power. Once we enter a higher realm of gnosis, beyond intellect or reason, we will indeed experience a new world where we can look at a color and I will see red while you will see blue. This will not confuse in that realm. It will instead enlighten us both to the true beauty of diverse connections embedded within our oneness. We will then be connected through the viability of universal similitude and not by our limited sharing perceptions. Of course, even in our current World System 1, this freer, more universal experience peeks through the cracks in the consensual membrane. Those of us who seek the greater unity will find ourselves gathering these daisies while we may, in preparation for the great leap into the new Earth star habitation. Well, as I read this, it's obvious to me, and it probably is obvious to you, that this is the great stage, the arena, in which the Owl, the One World Legion, the darker forces, are attempting to redesign our reality. And yet, those of us who choose to show up for the light again and again whom Thoth calls the light bearers. We are the ones that must recognize these pitfalls and allow ourselves to become true light bearers beyond what we have been in the past, so that we can radiate the field with this true path, this ability to see and know on a higher level of experience. We are certainly not perfected beings, so it will be challenging for us. But as we accomplish this, we will light the way for others. Planetary genius. This is another core topic for Thoth in his scientific perspective. And I have a video on this. In fact, I've mentioned it many times. Thoth on the planetary genius. It is the completed thought form containing the identity of consciousness for our world domain, from its alpha through omega. It is untainted, free of all illusion, and yet it is not omnipotent, as it defines and identifies. Therefore, it has a distinct polarity, and that polarity is to qualify and preserve the Ashatin of the earth. Now, the Ashatin is the latter days, all last things. In the book of Zarathustrian Lords, the lost book from the Akasha, which I translated, not all of it, but portions of it, the genius is the single most important vehicle in the completion of victory over evil. For an incarnated soul who has received his or her genius is the one form of being who can utterly destroy the beast. Now, Alexander Pope made the genius loci an important principle in garden and landscape design with the following lines from Epistle 4 to Richard Boyle, Earl of Burlington. And he says, "Consult the genius of the place in all, that tells the waters to rise or fall, or helps the ambitious hill the heavens to scale, or scoops in circling theaters the veil, calls in the country, catches opening glades, joins willing woods, and varies shades from shades, now breaks or now directs the intended lines, paints as you plant, as you work, designs." I wanted to include that because the planetary genius holds the doctrine of signature for everything that we can conceive on this world that is of light, beauty, grace, harmony, and design of spiritual content. When we transfer from a world system 1 to a world system 2, in this specific case, Thoth is calling it the new Earth star for this planet. So we will take that planetary genius with us, and that is why it is a new Earth, not just a new world of some kind. It will indeed still have the spiritual design of what we call Earth. Archon and Archonic cloud. According to Wikipedia, and I quote, "An archon in the Gnosticism of late antiquity was any of several servants of the demiurge, the creator god, that stood between the human race and a transcendent God that could only be reached through gnosis," that's inner knowing. In this context, they have the role of the daemons in Neoplatism. They give their name to the sect called Archontics. They were thus called from the Greek word principalities or rulers, by reason that they held the world to have been created and ruled by malevolent archons. The term was taken from the ancient Greek position of office, archon. According to Thoth, archon is not a creator god. This term was used for such when certain beings, such as the Anunnaki, there were many others as well, attempted to overrule or rule humanity on earth for periods of time. From the Thothic perspective, archon in its most ancient understanding, is the miasmic plasma cloud formed of energy not reconciled to divine source, separate from its creator. It is very dense, magnetic, and contracting, somewhat like a black hole, except it is not functional as a universal property. It only exists to attract and contain. Souls which are largely stagnant in their ability to recognize and integrate with the full light universal spectrum will be subsumed by the archonic cloud. When Thoth speaks of the Nephilim, these are, for the most part, beings who have been highly archonically invested. All of us are influenced by this magnetic cloud. It is those who give themselves fully to contraction of spirit are the ones sucked into its cesspool. If the archonic influence on this planet were to be cast out, which it eventually must be, we would have only our own karmic reflexes to master. As long as the cloud hangs above us, every karmic reflex is attenuated by its gravity. I received this information on the archons and the archonic cloud probably only in 2015, because I asked Thoth about archons. People were talking about them, and it was out there. And I said, well, what about this archon stuff, And that's when he presented me with this information, saying that there really weren't archons. There was an archonic cloud, which created this archonic investiture. He has also spoken of how it is breaking up at this time, but it was drawn into the planetary experience by the collective consciousness eons ago, and that allowed it to be vulnerable, our whole humanity to be vulnerable to it. He didn't go into any detail on that. But now it is breaking up, not magically, but in little bits and pieces. And so as it does, you see, it's drawn to a field. So this plasma cloud is drawn to a field that attracts it. He calls it a virus. Now, this was long before the you-know-what was in the air, that he used that term to describe it. But he says that it works like that. So it must feed on fear, anger, energies that are, disruptive to universal accord. And that's what it feeds on. And so in whatever way we let it into our atmosphere, our experience here, it feeds on us. And yet, because of the changing electromagnetic pressures that are part of the whole universal change we're going through, it's not able to sustain itself as well, because everything depends on the electromagnetic field to get into our spectrum, our physical spectrum. So eventually, it will dissipate enough that we will only have our personal karma to tend to. We think that that's all we have now, but no. If we just had that, life would be so much easier. However, we also have this dynamic of ascension going on. So what's going to come first, the complete dissipation of the archonic cloud or the transcending of the field? I think there's some kind of a delicate dance going on between those two principles. Now we come to ascension. The definition of ascension, which I received from the Thoth record of the Akasha, is the quantum burst of light being activated through the holographic intelligence field within the DNA. This burst is ignited in the heart, which is the actual seat of the holographic intelligence field, the DNA being its workforce. Only through the principle of divine love can we become the ascended being. planetary ascension, which translates living beings in Earth to another vibratory world dimension, is only an offshoot of the true ascension of the heart. The Great Pyramid of Giza and the whole complex of the Giza Plateau, but primarily the engine is the Great Pyramid, is the point on Earth where the flashpoint LP40 will begin for the ascension. So, at that point, the soul of Osiris, which is one of the two souls of the Christic being incarnated, the other being what Thoth calls the pure soul. The pure soul is the one that we know more as Yeshua and his performance of his duty, his life being dedicated to the Christos. That would have been after his baptism. That's the one that came forward more. But Osiris was the engine that brought that incarnation into being and maintained it up to the baptism and came back to help the pure soul during the crucifixion. That's a really quick analogy of all of that, but I wanted to show you the importance of Osiris. Of course, I have videos on all of this. So the Osiris soul will be in charge, I guess you could say, of the sparking of the light principle 40 within the Great Pyramid, in the vault of Osiris. So this is what Thoth has to say about that. As the Osiris penetrates the violet ray into the center space, so he, Osiris, the risen one, he who offered up the light of Yeshua on the cross, will then ascend through the violet flame into the higher heaven of the 8th octave as the fire star Kachina, carrying all the Kokopelli codes back to the greater creatrix. This act, the process outlined by Thoth here of ascending through the violet flame, is the dance of the fire star Kachina. Say the ancient texts of this event. I am the Osirium, peacock dancer, the fire star of the 8th house with the 12 pillars. The shimmer of my star feathers reveals the eye of Horus, the son of suns. It is through his eye of perfection and light that the 144,000 shall pass into the realm of splendor. According to Thoth, this is from the text of Osirim, early Atlanta, Egyptos, migrators from Atlantis to Egypt. If this sounds familiar, I've quoted this before at least 2 other times in my videos, but I just feel it is so important, and it's certainly in the context of what is being presented here. It is very much key to the whole modality of ascension that we are looking at, and how that power will not be diminished. And yet, we as human beings have to step up and receive it. If we do not, it will wait an eternity for us. And I don't think we want to do that. We've waited long enough. Another term I've brought forward in my videos before is Eshatan. That's Eschhaton. Now this isn't a Thoth word, but Rowena Patty Kreider in her Gaia Matrix Oracle defines Eshatan thusly. The earth is a wisdom body. Gaia has the perennial tradition at her core. Eshatan means the last things. All can be consumed except the truth, represented by the new earth spiritual world. The phase of Eshatan is an illuminative, fiery, spiritual consummation of earth and all beings within and upon her. That's the end of that quotation. Thoth agrees. It is in essence a sublime invocation, summoning truth to arise from the weight and measure of all that has come before, in the moments ordained as solvent within the created world habitation. We are now in the days of Ishat. We are in the latter days. So this speaks to our heart now. So I'm going to read what Thoth says about it again. It's just too important to move along before I do. It needs to sink in. It is in essence a sublime invocation, summoning truth to arise from the weight and measure of all that has come before, in the moments ordained as solvent within the created world habitation. I recently did a video on the Zeta body, that's Z-E-T-A, so I'm not going to go into it here, but I want to bring it up and just say that the Zeta body, which is in essence a supernal creation of our physicality when it meets the spiritual demand, where the soul says, activity must come about from a higher dimension now. You must receive that power that is in your inheritance, in the cells of your being. And this can occur at times when a person needs super strength to survive something or to save someone. But it's not just about that. It has much deeper implications, and it certainly is part of a necessity that we must command in order to move through the portal from a world system 1 to a world system 2. I also did a Substack recently on the critical rotational positioning of the brain on the brainstem and how it swivels, it moves very delicately into different positions like a flower. Because critical rotational position is something that botanists use, a term they use, to describe how a flower gravitates toward the sun. So this property that Thoth presented to me about the human brain on the brainstem was given to me, in the 1970s or 1980s, I'm not sure which, I think 1980s, early. And he was speaking about it in great detail. Now, I placed this in a recent Substack article, so I'm not detailing it here. However, it is critical, it is a critical thing, critical rotational positioning, for us in how we adjust to life and how we form our thinking process and our conclusions. Yes, that comes from our spiritual homogeny, from who we are as beings and all of that. But in order to interpret it and to bring it forward into the life experience, we must have a balance in our critical rotational positioning. And this is something that the owl are very much attempting to change, and they are to some extent. They're giving us signals that change that positioning, and those signals are interruptive maneuvers within the brain. And the most recent and the most profound of these interruptions is coming through the so-called protection to the so-called infection. And even if you haven't had that protection, you will have received a certain amount of that substance in your water supply, aerosol in the environment, through others shedding it, all of these different means. So to some degree, we all have it in our system now. And there are ways to get rid of that. Certainly mitigate it, but probably completely rid ourselves of it. However, since it's ongoing all the time, we have to keep ridding ourselves of it. And this is something I'm going to discuss in a moment at the conclusion of the video. You will find in the information box below this video a playlist that gives all the videos I created that I've mentioned topics upon here. I haven't done a video on every single one, but the ones that I have will be in this playlist. And I will also give you a link to the critical rotational positioning Substack article, and to what I'm going to be saying next. And that is, there is a mantra that Thoth gave me years ago, and I want to share it with you here, but I also just released it on Substack. And the reason for that is that I'm giving you the link to it, and you can go there to study it, to experience it more fully. And there will be these two images that you're seeing here for your computer and your phone. The mantra is Om Zim Raman Taso. Om Zim Raman Taso. Om Zim Raman Taso. Om is opening in creation sound, moving in harmonic meter with the universe. Raman is to the solar frequencies of love light. Taso, beyond the last syllable of the word, into the new octave of being. I was given this mantra by my Inner Planes mentor Thoth some years ago. It is in essence a call to the spirit in uniting with the soul, the mind, and the body for full manifestation of the Word made flesh. A deeper thought than can be easily explained to the linear mind. However, it is indeed the compelling principle of life as a full-throated psalm within the body of universal accord. Realize also that such mantras as this, and certainly this isn't the only one that you could be using, but it is one that I'm guided to share with you at this time. Such mantras as this lift you out of the perceptual reality of the magnetic world, of the geomagnetic influences on the lower, lesser level. That is, they're more compact, they're more magnetic, they're denser. It brings your soul-mind complex, as Thoth would call it, to a higher frequency that is outside the electromagnetic spectrum. And at this time, we certainly need that because the electromagnetic spectrum is changing, it's shifting, it's becoming erratic, and not because of anything the owl is doing. That is a birthing process, taking us, out of the spectrum and bringing us into a new, more enlightened one for the new Earth star. However, it's a birth pang, and certainly the owl are taking advantage of that. But we need to understand that we need to go with the movement. You cannot have, you can't say, well, I don't really want to have this baby. It's too much pain. I think I'll just skip it. It's conceived. It's within you. It's within us as a collective whole. So we're having to go through this. But we can align ourselves through various means to be able to move through it more succinctly and with less negativity influence around us. So one of the ways is to use mantras and affirmations and things of that nature to help us do that. But we mustn't become overly dependent on them because we're the ones that are changing this reality. These are just helpmates. And that's why I'm offering this to you here. Rather, Thoth is. He asked me to include it. We can also make sure, and I've said this before, that we eat the right foods, we drink the right water, and we live in an environment that is as free of the EMF frequencies and other trappings of artificial reality that impose signals on us that we don't want in our bodies. And of course, I'm sure all of you are involved in a process of sorting that out. And this video is not really about that, but I will say briefly that it's so important to eat non-GMO foods, organic if possible, and water. The water needs to be purified, and it needs to be brought into resonance. That means using something that allows the frequency of that water to come together harmoniously. This is what is called structured water. So first you make sure it's purified, through filters, and also make sure that filter has for microplastics. Get all of that out of the water. And then you use a means to structure it. Now there are several means out there, but I highly recommend the Analima water wand. There might be something better, I don't know, but Thoth led me to that, and I've found that it really helps me tremendously. So I'm recommending it. I will put a link to it below. And yes, it is an affiliate link for me. It's the only thing, I think, of all the things that I recommend that I have an actual affiliate link to at this time. Okay, so I think we have covered everything I wanted to in this video. And I appreciate those of you who have hung in there with me and listened to the whole thing. I know it's a lot, but I think if you really, really want to absorb what is going on the planet, it's a good thing to know these things, to look at how progressive the plan from the other side, from the darker side, is to keep us from receiving these incredible gifts of science and spirit. And when we know that it's there, and this is Thoth terminology, there could be other words used for other people, but when we know the science is there and it's on our side, it's part of our inheritance, it creates a stronger bond to the higher principle. And that's what we very much need at this time. That's why I was guided to take the time and energy to create this longer video, to place it all together for you. And I would suggest, if you have the time at all, to listen to it more than once, to absorb what is there for us and how we can focus on it, create our CRP, our critical rotational position, to focus on the light, focus on the sun like the flower does, and focus on these sciences that are behind the principles we operate within and that can lead us to the higher realms. And so it is.